There was once an era of gaming where every major company needed to have their own platforming mascot. Nintendo had Mario, Sega had Sonic, PlayStation had Crash. But there was another platforming mascot who seems to have been lost to time, and that is Ubisoft's Rayman. Rayman was created by Michael Ansel, and his first game came in 1995. The game was a simple 2D platformer, but there was an incredible amount of creativity with its characters and its world. The colors in the game popped, and I feel the graphics still hold up today for that reason. This was a time in gaming where I feel like 2D platformers were starting to become a bit saturated, but despite this, Rayman was able to stand on its own, and the game was a huge success. When researching for this video, I actually didn't realize just how well this game had sold. It was especially successful in Europe. According to Wikipedia, Rayman was the best-selling PlayStation 1 game in the UK, and that absolutely blows me away. It almost doesn't seem real, but apparently it is. And re-releases of the game have had equal levels of success. For example, the GBA version of the game sold around 800,000 copies. And these numbers put Rayman right alongside the other gaming greats and really kickstarted Ubisoft as a company. The first game was a major success, but another test was coming for this franchise, and that was the shift to 3D. It kind of feels like this beginning of the 3D era was when a lot of franchises kind of fell off, and I say this because while some franchises were able to make the leap to 3D seamlessly like Mario, other franchises really seemed to struggle and they weren't really able to find their footing in this new dimension. This was going to be a huge moment for the future of Rayman, and Rayman finally made his jump to 3D with Rayman 2: The Great Escape releasing in 1999, and the game is absolutely incredible. It has everything you would want from a 90s, early 2000 era 3D platformer. Rayman 2 has a little bit of a darker tone than the original game, and you can probably see that just from the colors alone. This was kind of a risky move, but I love this change because it gave Rayman a different vibe from some of the other big 3D platformers of the time. This was another one of those games that re-released on just about everything for years after its release. I remember having Rayman 3D on my 3DS, and I played that a ton as a kid. A few years later, Rayman 3 Hoodlum Havoc was released. This game didn't get quite the same levels of critical praise as the second game, but it's still very good. I feel like this game gets forgotten because it really wasn't re-released as often as the second game. Despite this, the game was another commercial success, and with a great trilogy under his belt, Rayman was set to continue his dominance in the platforming space. Development on Rayman 4 began soon after. The game would feature Michael Ansel's newest creation, the Rabbids. The Rabbids were these weird rabbit creatures that had basically gone mad. Rayman would have to save the world from this army of Rabbids. But then, something horrible happened. The development team got their hands on a development kit for Nintendo's newest console, the Nintendo Wii. The team was enthralled by the new possibilities from the motion controls. This was when the game shifted from a traditional 3D platformer to more of a mini-game compilation. It was also at this time that the game lost the Rayman 4 title, and it became called Rayman Raving Rabbids. The game is really nothing special. It's kind of what you would expect from a Wii launch title. It's a minigame compilation meant to showcase what was possible with the Wii's motion controls. It wasn't horrible at the time, but it's not really worth going back to now. The game was a big success, and I feel like this wasn't so much because of the quality of the game, but more so just because the Wii was such a phenomenon at launch. Really, any game that was available on the shelf day one was going to get a huge boost. But regardless, the game was a big success, and it was pretty big for the Rayman franchise. Okay, so no big deal, right? Spin-off games are fine, and having this game be such a hit could really help out with the sales of Rayman's next traditional platformer. But instead, Rayman Raving Rabbids 2 was released a year later, and this time Rayman was not even on the box art. And then a third Rabbids game was released in 2008. Rayman was barely even in these two games, and it was clear that this series was not really being treated as a Rayman spin-off anymore. I mean, this was a whole new franchise at this point. TV Party was the last Rabbids game where Ubisoft would even include the Rayman branding. It was clear Ubisoft had chose to focus more on the Rabbids instead of Rayman. Now, I will say, I actually don't hate these games. I mean, I was a kid at the time, so they were pretty fun. I remember playing TV Party a lot, and I actually have a really fond memory of playing TV Party with my dad. And that's notable because my dad very rarely ever played video games with me, but we had a lot of fun playing this one together. And really, this was the whole reason why the Rabbids were so successful. The games were fun and easy to understand. They had appeal to everyone, even if you weren't a gamer. But even with this said, it really did get a bit absurd. Ubisoft released a Rabbids game every year from 2006 to 2010, and in that time, Rayman got no new games. The Rabbids had become Ubisoft's new mascot, and poor Rayman was forgotten. But finally, in 2011, after 9 years without a new mainline Rayman game, Rayman Origins was released. As you may expect by the name, the game went back to the 2D origins of the franchise. Rayman Origins is another fantastic game. The hand-drawn style is beautiful, and the world has the same unique feel of the original games. I've always just loved how weird this franchise is, and Rayman Origins has plenty of that. Another thing I really appreciate about this game is the difficulty. I mean, the game isn't like Super Meat Boy levels of difficult or anything, but there is a nice challenge here, and this was at a time when all of Nintendo's games were just like stupidly easy, so it was a really nice change of pace to have this difficulty. It didn't stop there. 2 years later, Rayman Origins got a sequel titled Rayman Legends. The graphics are beautiful, the music is fantastic, and it's such a joy to play. It's not as hard as Origins, but there's still a nice level of difficulty, and honestly, Rayman Legends is my favorite Rayman game, and it's one of my favorite games of all time. It's one of those games I just can't help buying over and over. I bought it on the Wii U when it was originally released in 2013. I bought it again for my PS4 a couple years later, and just a couple years ago, I bought it again for the Switch. And every time I rebuy the game, I play through it all over again. It's just so perfect. Every time I replay it, I'm blown away all over again. I truly think it's one of the best platformers ever made by a company that isn't Nintendo. So with 2 new fantastic 2D platformers to his name, the weird Rabbids era was behind us, and it seemed as though Rayman was finally back, and I couldn't wait to see what was next. Could it be a third 2D platformer? Or maybe we could even see a new 3D game? But then, nothing. The series went dark again. We haven't had a new mainline Rayman game since 2013 when we got Rayman Legends. I have no idea why Ubisoft has such a love-hate relationship with this character. I do understand that the series doesn't sell as many copies as Ubisoft's other games like Assassin's Creed or Far Cry, but seriously, we can't get one new game in a decade? Recently though, there have been some signs of life for the character. He was featured in a DLC for Mario plus Rabbids Sparks of Hope. The DLC titled Rayman and the Phantom Show was a really nice return for the character. Honestly though, it kind of felt like PTSD for me as a Rayman fan. Just like in the late 2000s era, it appears Ubisoft wants nothing to do with Rayman unless those Rabbids are there with him. But Rayman did get another appearance recently in Ubisoft's anime, Captain Laserhawk. The anime is super weird and I don't really understand what it even is, but I do know it features some of Ubisoft's characters in ways we have never seen before. And one of those characters is Rayman. You might have seen this picture going around Twitter recently, and yes, that is Rayman eating sushi off a cowgirl's ass. Like I said, Ubisoft was never afraid to get weird with this character. It is cool to see Rayman making some appearances again, and maybe it's a sign of a new game coming, but honestly, it's kind of rubbing me the wrong way. The Rayman DLC in Mario plus Rabbids has constant jokes about the fact that Rayman is forgotten, and that Rayman gets overshadowed by the Rabbids. The Ubisoft anime makes Rayman a dejected social outcast, and it almost feels like Ubisoft is teasing Rayman fans. Clearly, they know the demand is there for this character, or he would just be retired completely. Instead, they keep sprinkling these appearances of him. Honestly, if every Rayman appearance is just going to be poking fun at the fact that there are no new Rayman games, I think I would rather just let the character die. Having just 5 mainline games in the series in 30 years is just ridiculous. Meanwhile, Ubisoft's other franchises like Assassin's Creed, Far Cry, and Rabbids have gotten far more games in a much smaller amount of time. I feel like Ubisoft has become a lifeless company in recent years, and I think the lack of care or focus on Rayman is just a perfect representation of this. With this current state of Ubisoft, I'm becoming less and less confident that we will ever see another true Rayman game. I hope I'm wrong, but I guess for now, I'll just keep waiting. It's what us Rayman fans are best at.